Hello there. This is Mike with Play More Games, and this is the start, so to speak, of my YouTube channel. So, what I'm thinking that I'll use this for is for Let's Play videos, just playthroughs of war games specifically. Might give you some thoughts and things like that. You know, I do play a lot of games, like mostly solitaire, but, you know, what I really enjoy almost as much as playing games is talking about them. So this is kind of a nice marriage of content and delivery vehicle in that I'll be able to both play these games through the kind use of Vassal and talk about them, which normally is just pretty much to myself. So the first game I'm going to play is Saipan, the Bloody Rock. This is the first title that was published in the company scale system. It was designed by Adam Starkweather, game developer Ross Martell, published by Compass Games in 2017. The company scale system series is now at this point, I believe, 6 titles. You have the Saipan, Tinian, Guam in the Pacific. In European theater, you have Montelimar. You have out east, you have the the Little Land. And then in more modern era, you have in 1985 Fulda Gap, which was just published. I own all of them. I've played most of them, which is to say I've played half of them. So I have really enjoyed what I've played of Tinian in Saipan in the Little Land, and I have no reason to believe that you know, I won't enjoy Fulda Gap and Montelimar as I get to it. So I'm going to start with Saipan. You know, if I can, you know, if there's some positive feedback to this, you know, I might go on and do another title in this series, or I might switch up to a different series. You know, hopefully I find that once I get started I can keep doing it. You know, there's not a ton of other things going on right now. Alright. One last thing, and this is kind of a cheesy personal note, so feel free not to listen or to skip ahead or to turn it off, because I am a little bit sappy. I'm going to go ahead and dedicate, you know, this channel and this playthrough series to my wargame buddy, my cat, Jody, who passed away last week. I really came to appreciate having her by my side while I would play a game on Vassal at the computer, or, you know, I had my office where I had my war game set up. You know, I would spend hours in there hunched over a table, moving counters around, and you know, she would sit with me the entire time. So, you know, I miss her. She was a good buddy. She listened to me when I ranted and rambled. You know, she helped me with some good dice rolls when they were needed, and helped me feel better when the bad ones came up. So there's that. Alright. Now, if I haven't lost your attention so far, we're going to go over the situation on Saipan, and depending on how we're doing on time, we'll do the 0700 turn, or at least the prep for the 0700 turn. So I will annotate the video with that if you feel like you're an old hand at this or want to, you know, skip this part. So again, I'm just going to go over situation, what's going on, who's where, what the objectives are for the Japanese player and what the objectives are for the American player. All right, so this is Saipan, and actually what I'll do really quickly is I'll just run through the features of the module, because it is a fairly robust module. So just if you follow along from the top, obviously you have the dice, markers, so most of this you can do with right mouse button commands, but in case you ever need to grab your barrage markers, things like that, they're up there. Turn track, so we start on the first day of the invasion in the campaign game, June 15th. It is a 25-day campaign, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at 9 turns a day, that's what, 225 turns? So it's definitely a long campaign, and I don't know, my intent is to get through all of it because I haven't done it before, and I would really like to be able to say that I've done it. But if we get to a point and it's kind of looking like, you know, maybe the Americans are running out of steam, or if Japan is just folding over, we might call it early. But, you know, here is, you know, your tracks. We have our preparatory bombardments for this turn and next turn, and our air supports. The weather table, which you only roll on once at the start of each day. So here's your activation chits, here's your chit pool. And what's really nice, and I'll show you when we come to this, is you can actually put whatever chit you have active here, and it'll highlight all those units on the map, which is very nice because there's a lot of units on the map. There's maybe about 100 Japanese units. They pretty much all start on the board with a couple of exceptions, and about the same to come for the Americans. But here are the individual chit displays, and if you're new to the system, and I'll just say that I will approach these first couple of videos as if you're new to the system watching this, partly because, you know, I would like for this to be an accessible entry video for the company scale system. Maybe it's something that you look at and say, oh hey, that's pretty neat, you know, I'll check it out. Or maybe you're following along just because this kind of stuff interests you. That being said, the caveat is I have not played company scale system in about 6 months, so there might be a couple of errors. So if you're new, one of the things, this is a chit pull system, and you pay for what chits go in, so it allows you some command and control in that aspect. One thing that may not be immediately obvious by looking at this, but the United States activation chits, you have your division chits, and then you have chits by formation. The United States formations are much larger than the Japanese formations, so you get a lot more bang for your buck with the US activation chits. So that's kind of nice. You know, it models one of the differences between the two fighting forces at this point in the war. So moving on, we have our division displays. It has, and if you're familiar with GTS, Adam's other system, a lot of this is going to sound like review. So you have your division trackers with command rating, dispatch rating, troop quality. Command and dispatch are kind of like, suffice it to say, that's the fuel for buying your chits and activating your units. You also keep here support weapons, trucks, heroes, and then the general records track. We'll touch on all of this as we get going. So this is the Marine Division. The 2nd and the 4th, they start in the landing craft. The next day, June 16th, we'll start to see the 27th Infantry Division come on, and they're a little bit larger than either of the Marine divisions, but they certainly have big differences in troop quality and dispatch rating. And we'll kind of have to figure out a way to use them effectively. Then we move on to the Empire of Japan. There's some reinforcement units here that may enter later. So these units start in the routed box. And to just kind of do a side-by-side. So the 2nd Marine Division, higher command rating, which is good, higher dispatch rating, which is good, higher max troop quality, which is good, and again, 4th Marine Division, higher command rating, higher dispatch rating, higher troop quality. Then you have the Naval Guard Force, and yeah, you can see it's not a pretty picture there. Now, I'm not a military historian by any stretch of the imagination, but at this point in the campaign, the situation was pretty dire for Japan. It certainly is an interesting game, even though the American firepower is overwhelming, because, as they say, it is the Bloody Rock, right? It earned its nickname. So, now that I've segued a little bit, this is just a graveyard. As the American, you expect to see a lot of your enemy chits end up here. That's one of the victory conditions. We'll touch on it when we get into that. Terrain effects chart should be familiar. Combat tables, including random event tables, modifiers, all that good stuff. Pretty self-explanatory. Sequence of play, assault sequence, fire modifiers. These are all actually stuff that's on the map. That's why it's kind of got the bluish background there. It's a very beautiful map. It's very nice. I hope that the screen resolution can kind of do it some justice. Alright, so these two are inventory, if you're missing a piece, whatever. These are the kind of buttons that I was talking about highlighting units. We'll use those as they come up. Up here are the scenario setup cards. So we're doing scenario 5. I've already gone ahead and set up all the Japanese forces, with the exception of the reinforcement groups here. We'll start rolling for them later on the 15th. Oh, I will pull out the sake and stick that to the side. And then on B here we have the American reinforcements, and I will pull out the whiskey. Just going to keep them to the side there. I'll pull out the task forces as well. So that's all we should need from that. Notes. If you're playing via Vassal, you can do the delayed notes to hide your chit purchases, because you can kind of keep those a secret. Zoom, print screen, hide units, remove barrage markers, remove movement markers. Pretty self-explanatory. When you come down to the units, I'll just right-click this one. You can place markers. You can flip the unit for if it is in column or deployed. You can put a caves marker on it. You can put a Yokusai marker on it. You can highlight a movement trail. You can add fire combat markers. You can add disorganized markers. You can mark it as complete. You can show, you can add foxholes, trenches, ridge markers. You can label them. You can show whether it's in command or not. And being in command is extremely important. So that's actually a nice feature. Let me just back up all of that. Okay. Great. So let's take a look at the situation, right? We'll start up here in the, actually we'll start in the south. We'll start where the units are. This is where the narrative starts. So this is the historical setup. There is a free setup and we'll get into that as we go through this. But here are where the Marine divisions start. So you have the 4th Marine Division here at Green Beach, Red Beach. Then you have the 2nd Marine Division at Yellow and Blue Beach. I got that backwards, actually. The dark green is the 2nd, and the light green is the 4th. So on each turn, when you pull the amphibious movement chit, each of these will drop down a box towards the beaches. Japan may be able to make some opportunity fire on them, whether they're hitting the beach hex or whether they're moving through these boxes. We'll talk about that as we go through it. And if we follow our reinforcement schedule on each turn, like let's just say next turn, the 0900 turn, we put these units in at red 2 or red 3. So we would just add them back there. So you kind of form like a conga line heading to the beach. And it's why it's important to get pushing once you hit the beach, because there are some pretty severe stacking penalties in this game. Alright. So that's the Americans. Now the Americans, sorry this is a little disjointed. Let me back up and just talk about the victory conditions. So you can score a victory condition by basically getting to 29 victory points and then whittling your opponent back down to 0 victory points. So basically once you have a differential of 29 between your opponent. So, the Americans score victory points for grabbing these victory point hexes, and that's just the simple little V's. And then they score victory points at the end of every game turn, in which the number of days elapsed exceeds the number of days elapsed is less than or equal to the number of victory points. So let me put that in practical matters. So let's say it's day 1 of the campaign. At the very end of the night, if I have 3 victory points, I score the difference between the number of victory points in the day. So I would get 2 bonus victory points. So you really can add up a lot of victory points if you get off to a nice start. So just to kind of show where a lot of these are, we have victory points on the southern tip of the island here, Asleto Airfield, the city here, the mountains here, 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 in Death Valley here, 3 or 4 on this side of the island here. If we scroll up, there's only 1 in this large city area, but there's quite a few on these mountains here. 1 over here, 1 over here, and then you have just 1 way up here. So most of your victory points are in the south. And if you come back out and look, quite a few of your units as Japan are located in the south. So that's how you win on victory points for the Americans. For the Japanese, the name of the game is causing casualties. Eliminating units, pushing the Americans back into the sea if possible. It may be possible on that first or second day to route them back to the beaches. But it's a kind of an all-in type situation, since you're not going to have that second line of defense or third line of defense. Now, since this is not the free setup, these beaches ultimately are not going to be used. Strategy as the Americans is going to be to, at least in my mind going into this, we want to, cut the peninsula, or cut the island in half, send this division north, send this division towards this area, and then when the 27th comes in tomorrow, we wrap up all of these things here to the south. That brings us to the other objective for the Americans, which is to eliminate all enemy forces by the end of the campaign. If the campaign comes to its ending point and the Japanese have any units left on the map, they win, right? So you definitely want to eliminate those forces, So you want to kind of find the right tempo of, moving to secure territory, because you do have it is a race against the clock, right? It is possible for the Japanese to win a survival victory. So hopefully that's starting to paint a picture of what we need to have happen here to win. There's definitely a couple of different valid ideas on how to do it. Do you throw all of your forces to repel the Americans and kind of go all in? Or do you fight that really long attritional fight? There's a lot of really good defensible territory here. The Bloody Rock is apt. It's a giant rock. There's lots of rocky terrain with favorable defensive modifiers. There's lots of caves. There's lots of ridges. Japan can hold up in the hills and really, really make the Americans pay for every hex that they take. All right. So we looked at the American start, and that's pretty straightforward, but let's look at the Japanese start as well. So since, we have the hindsight of history, they've fortified the whole island. We know, since we're playing the game, what's kind of going to happen. So technically, I suppose, you could really just rush to meet the allies, since you're not going to get flanked in the back. But here's the thing, that's going to eat up a lot of actions. It's going to group your targets together. It's going to certainly something that you could consider, right? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. So just starting from the southernmost point, we have some naval. These are white firepower units, which means they can fire either high explosive or armor piercing. They're direct fire, so these units are really valuable. You definitely wish you would have them over here, as we'll find out while the Americans are landing. Obviously there's a reason that they didn't choose to land over here, and it's because they have these huge honking artillery pieces with 5 firepower, 8 range, which is very nice. You have a couple of smaller ones here from the 47th Mixed Brigade, much lighter firepower. They're covering the airfield. And this is a huge objective for the Allies, because once they capture the airfield and repair it and get it operational, they're going to get a nice bonus to their air support chit, which should really, really come in handy as you're pushing your way through the island. So you have those units there. Coming over to where the Americans are actually landing, I'm going to highlight a couple of trouble areas. There's this unit here, which is a nice artillery piece. It's in a cave, so it's going to be tough to root out of there. Now, if we flip this off, basically the way that I've understood the line of sight rules is that as long as it's not aimed over this blocking terrain, it's got a line of sight. So, the way I'm envisioning it, it's not a single cave with like a single hole that's pointing out. It's a network of caves. So, there is that possibility to, aim it. So it could very well conceivably hit, these beaches here. It's got a range of 8. So when you want to fire on the hex, the boxes here, you count to the beach hex, and then you add whatever it says here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, excuse me, 5. So it could conceivably hit any of those hexes. So that's a nasty one. We're going to try and take that out pretty much right away, because we don't want it to really be drilling these boxes. The other thing we'll try to do is we'll try to get some bombardment fire on it to reduce its fire zone. So that's a pain point. There's also a unit here. Unfortunately, does not have. Actually, let me check. Does Marsh Black line of sight? No. This unit here can see down to the beaches here. This one here can see to the beaches. Let's see. So those are ones that are in range. Can cause some damage. There's lots of black indirect fire units here. And while, yes, they cannot hit the units in the naval zone, they can't opportunity fire, they can still absolutely drill the Americans once they get on here. They have plenty of range, and, you know, they might have a low firepower value, but there's really so many of them that it's volume, but it also is those barrage markers, and once we get into it, you know, you'll start to see how those barrage markers work, and really just how they can kind of tangle up the Americans. Adjacent to all of these beaches are Japanese units in trenches. You know, it's pretty likely that as soon as they land, they're going to op fire on these units, start causing pain for the Americans right away. And as you can see, they've definitely selected a forward defense. Yeah, so lots of firepower there. Over here, there's also a lot of firepower. There's another artillery piece that unfortunately does not have a good angle to the beach. You have more infantry companies and artillery pieces as well. So I think for the Japanese, these units here will probably form a second line around the mountains here. I probably won't spend too many of those commands right away, just because I'm going to want to churn out all of the actions that I can up here. Moving north, we have this city here, Garapan. It's got a nice tank unit. It's got one artillery piece. It's not great. Can't really do too much with it. We might be able to move it and redeploy it somewhere where we can. That might be nice. If you scroll up, each of these beaches have a unit next to them. Just kind of the same idea of, they wanted to make sure all the approaches were covered. So that's that. If you come to the north point of the island, there's a couple of naval companies, some artillery pieces, infantry companies. There's quite a few, so it really depends on how this campaign goes. They might dig in and let the Americans come to them. We'll see. Yeah. So that's a pretty good overview of the situation in Japan. So the first day objectives really for the Americans is to get on board to push out 1 or 2 hexes, to have places for the reinforcements to land. It would be nice to kind of secure a 2 to 3 hex radius. We'll see how that goes. Japan certainly has a lot of troops they can bring forward. We would like to eliminate a lot of these artillery pieces, or at least suppress them, or put them under barrage markers. In other words, find ways to lower their effectiveness, so we can reduce the amount of casualties coming on board. And then from there, we have a long campaign ahead of us. So, all right. I think I'm going to clip this here, and I will upload this as one video, so kind of the channel intro and Saipan intro. So the next video will be the 0700 turn, and kind of the pre-game stuff. All right. So again, this is Mike. Thank you for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll start chucking some dice next time, and we'll see what happens. So again, this is Mike with Play More Games, and have a good one.